Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Manatee County Candidate Forum. I am Alice Newland, the immediate past president of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan public policy organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League has both women and men as members. The League does not support or oppose any candidate or party. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the League of Women Voters of Manatee County and Manatee Educational Television's websites. Reference can be made to it. It can be shown in its entirety. However, it is the property of the League of Women Voters, and partial showing or posting cannot be used without written permission by the League of Women Voters. I am pleased to introduce our moderator. Renee James Gilmore is host of ABC7's Empowering Voices. Ms. Gilmore is widely respected for her thoughtful interviews, community-focused journalism, and her commitment to elevating civic dialogue across our region. Renee?
Thank you, Alice. The Republican candidates for State Representative District 72 are Bill Conerly and John Phillips III. The winner of the primary will face Democratic Party candidate Harvey Schafran in the general election. Today's candidate forum rules call for stability on the part of both candidates and the audience. The hallmark of democracy is the willingness of our community to treat each other with courtesy and respect. It's in that spirit that we are here now to engage in a vital part of our democratic process, a civilized discussion of important issues that confront our communities. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer a question, and at the end of the forum, each will have 1 minute for a closing statement. Linda Long will call time when the minute is up. Candidates, please, when she says time, please finish your sentence. We'll alternate which candidate goes first in answering a question. Audience members, at the end of the forum, the candidates will have 1 minute for a close and to appeal for your vote. We ask all candidates speak only for themselves and not provide insight into their opponent's positions. There will be no rebuttals. So let's get started. Candidate Conerly, we're going to talk with you first. Please let us know what led you to run for the seat and why should voters choose you to represent them?
Thank you, Ms. Gilmore. I realized that my area of expertise, I'm a licensed civil engineer. It was something that was necessary. I'm actually the incumbent for this seat. I'm the only engineer in the Florida House or the Senate. I tend to focus on technical issues. I know social issues are important, but I joke, I say I'm an engineer, and what that means is I'm not burdened by human emotion. I'm basically a data guy who focuses on things that are more physical for solutions like infrastructure, water, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Phillips.
Thank you first, League of Women Voters, for having me and giving me this opportunity. And thank you, Renee, not only for moderating, but for your work with the Sarasota Memorial Cemetery. Appreciate that. What led me to run was after 31 years of service to my country in the Coast Guard, I was able to retire and no longer being the commanding officer of a Coast Guard cutter and having those responsibilities and having to balance my military career with my work life. I was able to start paying a lot closer attention to local politics and what was going on in Manatee County. I grew up in Pinellas County, and after moving around with the Coast Guard quite a bit, I got back to Florida and found it to be overdeveloped and completely overrun by traffic and just poor planning. So I started looking into local politics, and I seen what's going on here, and I want to have an impact on that as best I can to prevent Manatee County from becoming Pinellas County.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to start with this next question with you, candidate Phillips. What is your work experience Also, what public service, community involvement, and leadership positions have you had?
Well, as I mentioned in my previous statement, 31 and a half years in the Coast Guard. I served in 4 commanding officer positions and 1 officer in charge position. So I've had leadership for more than half of my career. And I was very fortunate that more than half of my career took place in the state of Florida. So, being a member of the U.S. military, you have to spend a lot of time away from your family and doing public service. And how that ties into community and serving the community. Well, I mentioned half of my career taking place in Florida. Well, we have these things in Florida called hurricanes, and every hurricane season, while my family's preparing for their hurricane and the storm that's coming to hit us, I had to evacuate with my cutter to make sure that we were able to come back in time to reopen the waterways and serve our community and get commerce flowing. So I have that degree in the military aspect and the leadership that comes with making the decisions to get the ports reopened and make navigation safe for the people of Florida almost immediately after a hurricane.
Thank you. Candidate Conerly.
Yes, the experience I have, I've lived in Lakewood Ranch, Manatee County for 29 years, and I've been in business the entire time in the county. I grew up in DeSoto County, which is just down the road. So I've been in the area a long time. With regard to involvement, I've served on about, I think it's 9 different voluntary boards through the county. The Bike and Pet Advisory, the Environmental Lands Management, and groups like that. In addition, the business that I'm in, I'm a consulting engineer. We have around 140 people in our office here, and I'm with the leadership team. I've been a owner for the company, with the company for about 12 years. So one of the focuses I have with regard to my legislative service is trying to put businesses in position where they can excel in Florida and do well. So that's been a focus over the years.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is for you. A 2-part question, actually. First, what are your funding sources? How much is local and how much is out of state? And the second part of that question is, what are your endorsements?
Okay. Funding sources, I'm not exactly sure if I can give you a clear number. I have about 181 different contributors. I did look at that, and it varies from agricultural communities, different organizations. I do have a lot of PACs, and I know in many cases the PACs have a derogatory appearance with regard to the contributions, but I'd like to point out the PACs I have that are supporting me are ones like the Florida Police Benevolent Association. I've got PACs like the Florida Dentists, the chiropractors, Florida Cow PAC is supporting me. So it's a wide variety of businesses, agricultural businesses, construction, engineering companies. It's a very, very broad set of representations. With regard to the endorsements, I've currently been endorsed by Manatee County Sheriff Ricky Wells, Sarasota County Sheriff Kurt Hoffman, the Florida Agricultural Commission Commissioner Wilton Simpson, the CFO for Florida Blaze Golia. I've also been in. Okay, I've got a lot of endorsements. So
Thank you for that. Candidate Phillips, it is a 2-part question. First, what are your funding sources? How much is local? How much is state? And second, what are your endorsements?
The funding is largely my own contribution of a loan from my personal savings, because that's how important this is to me. I held a campaign kickoff fundraiser where I combined with my kickoff fundraiser and what I've been able to collect in that time is about 13,000 total. And they're all small donations. There's no PACs. I'm not taking any money from PACs. I'm running a grassroots campaign. I'm relying heavily on, door knocking and social media just to get my message out there. And as far as endorsements goes, I'm honored to say that I was the first candidate this year to get the endorsement of the Bradenton Times. And if you haven't listened to my podcast with Dawn and Mitch, you should. And I'm also endorsed by Defending Rural Florida, which is a political organization with over 11,000 followers on Facebook, and several other politically active and influential individuals that I don't have time to name in less than a minute. I can also say that I'm the preferred candidate of the America First Party, Florida, one of the fastest growing political parties in the state of Florida right now. And while it may not count as an official endorsement, I'm most proud of the fact that I personally met with over 1,790 District 72 residents while collecting their signatures to qualify for the ballot by petition.
Thank you for that. And this question is for you as well. What are the top 3 legislative initiatives you would champion?
Well, in meeting with all those people, first and foremost is slowing the growth, which just happens to be my campaign motto. And I think the only way we do that is we fix SB 180. After that, we need to look at restoring home rule. A lot of bills and things that have been passed in Tallahassee seem to be removing home rule, and that's where the people are most concerned. People really, really need to consider, especially the people in Tallahassee that may hang out with only one group of type of people or travel in certain areas. Florida is a very diverse state. Not only is Florida the state diverse with places like Alachua or Palatka, and then Key West and Miami. The differences there are incredible, but we have the same type of differences here in Manatee County. You got the people in Mayaca City and Duet, and then you have people out in Anna Maria and Terracea. Those are entirely different locations. People have different needs, and you can't apply one size fits all rules to the entire county, just like you can't do it to the entire state.
Okay, thank you for that. Candidate Conerly, what top 3 initiatives would you champion?
Yes, I'm in a little bit different position. I've already had the opportunity to champion a lot of different priorities, but generally speaking, going into this election, again, it's the communication I've tried to have throughout my entire term. It's housing affordability, infrastructure, and water. And when I say water, I'm talking about sourcing of potable water, storm resiliency, flood mitigation, flood management, things like that. With regard to my service in the legislature already, I have passed several bills. I just got my PFAS bill, the per and polyfluoroalkyl substance bill, signed by the governor, and that goes into law yesterday. So I'm very happy about that. In addition, I was a co-sponsor on Senate Bill, the House version of Senate Bill 320, 302, the one that was related to the protection of Terracea. So that was something I was very proud of. In addition,
Okay. And Candidate Conerly, this question is for you as well. Senate Bill 180 limits how counties and municipalities can amend their comprehensive plans. Do you support Senate Bill 180 as it's currently written? And if not, what specific changes would you pursue to address those provisions you disagree with?
Yes, ma'am. The initial effort for Senate Bill 180, a lot of people don't understand or realize that the bills actually name emergencies. So it was a byproduct of the storms we had in 2024. And the idea was to ensure that the economy is stable by addressing certain issues, like with regard to redevelopment of properties that were destroyed. There was a section in it that was interpreted that would not allow any amendments to the the comprehensive plan or the land development code for areas that were affected. So with that understanding, the other issue that is important is that there's a time limit on it. It expires in October of 27. So really, without any action, it expires.
Okay, Candidate Phillips. Same question. Senate Bill 180 has counties and municipalities limits how counties and municipalities can amend the comprehensive plan. Do you support Senate Bill 180 as it's currently written? And if not, what specific changes would you pursue to address the provisions that you disagree with?
Oh, I strongly oppose SB 180, as do many of the residents in Manatee County. It's a large basis of what I'm running my campaign on. Many counties across Florida are deeply concerned about the language of the bill. They had a lawsuit. Manatee County was involved in that. At the same time, our freshwater supply is under growing strain from excessive development, heavy use by companies such as Mosaic and the potential for AI data centers. I understand that as a representative of 120 other representatives, I can't change it alone, but meaningful progress will be required to support my colleagues in the House and the Senate. And the biggest thing is we're worried about this language of burdensome and I forget what the other, restrictive and burdensome, those two words we're getting focused on. But as far as rewriting the county comprehensive plan, well, I mean, all of my voters know who's involved in doing that now, and we don't need to rush that county comprehensive plan before the county commission is changed out. There seems to be a rush to do that here as well. I'm sorry, answering in less than a minute is very tough.
Thank you for doing what you can to answer it. There are all questions for sure. Okay, Candidate Conerly.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I think this question's for Phillips.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Candidate Phillips. The same question. This question is for you. Some Floridians feel that changes to the citizen initiative process over the last 5 years have limited the public's ability to place issues on the ballot. What is your position on the citizens initiative process as it exists today? And what, if anything, would you change about it?
Well, this is where you caught me as being an inexperienced politician, because that's not one of the points that I'm briefed up on. So I will gladly pass that on to my opponent.
Thank you.
And I'll look into it, and I'll do like I would do with any question that I receive from my constituents. If I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody that does, and I'll weigh the factors and make a logical decision based on the input that I've received from my constituents. So
thank you. Candidate Connor.
Yes, ma'am. We worked on this in the 25 session, and one of the things that became very evident is the citizen initiative process is being taken over by corporations. A very good example of that was the legalized marijuana, where when you looked at the funding of where the dollars were coming from, it was mainly the majority of it was from corporate sponsors. With that understanding, the ensuring that the citizens can initiate amendments to the Constitution is very, very important, and it's something that I support. The benefit of having input from citizens is it's tremendous, understanding how it impacts the residents of Florida. But I'm out of time, so
thank you.
Can we get 2 minutes from now on?
I will make sure to pass that on to the lead. But you make the point. We all recognize that these are all very complex issues. And so that's why I appreciate both of you so much for taking the time to respond as best you can to this within the limited time. Candidate Conerly, do you support the constitutional amendment to reduce property taxes for most homesteaded homeowners? Why or why not? And what taxes or tax rates should be changed in Florida?
In reality, it doesn't matter if I support it. We've already passed the referendum. What I support is the citizens of the state getting the choice to vote on their property taxes. The reality is that you could have a neighbor that pays property taxes that are 3 times more than the neighbor next to them, and they get the same exact services. There's really, I hate to use this as an analogy, but there's no equity in our system we have. So I think regardless if the amendment passes, this is an opportunity to evaluate and hold our local municipal governments, 67 counties and the 411 cities accountable for the money that they collect and spend.
Thank you. Candidate Phillips.
Well, how many times have we seen bills and laws passed that go into effect that everybody was worried about or concerned about? And this is the first time that I've seen the beneficiary of a bill or something that was up for a referendum being beneficial to the taxpayer, not some corporation or special interest. I know the overwhelming concern is if we cut property taxes, how will we pay for basic services? Well, we already know that we will still pay for school district taxes, and the DOJ committees have found wasteful spending and everything out throughout several counties. But the thing that I'm grateful for that this is going to the vote to the people, and I've spoken with over 1,790 people as so far, probably 2,000 by now, and that seems to be weighing heavily on both sides. So it'll be interesting to see how this vote turns out. But I was very happy to find out that there wouldn't be an immediate zero exemption, because that would just open the floodgates of an already overcrowded state.
Candidate Phillips, we're going to stay with you on this next question. Florida has long had a balanced economic development, long had to balance economic development with protecting its coastal environment. What are your positions on offshore drilling and on proposals for a cruise port? And how do you believe the state should weigh economic benefits against environmental risk when considering these issues?
Okay, well, I'm strongly opposed to offshore drilling. We need to protect our natural environment as best we can. I lived in Key West for 2 years, and you can see parts of the reef dying there. I was also involved in the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. I actually reported to a Coast Guard cutter that was stationed in Baltimore, but it was already in the Gulf. So I've seen that firsthand, what kind of impact these disasters can have on our environment. So again, strongly opposed to that. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
The second part of that question is, how do you believe the state should weigh economic benefits against
Right. I apologize. I got eclectic about the whole BP experience, but essentially, we're moving away from, we're having such great advances in technology and power, whether it be electric cars, solar, and all these other options, that the economic benefit that we would get from offshore drilling the coast of Florida, it's just not worth the risk, if you ask me.
Thank you for that. Candidate Conerly?
Yes, ma'am. Could you please repeat the entire question?
Certainly can. Has long had to balance economic development with protecting its coastal environment.
Right.
What are your positions on offshore drilling and on proposals for a cruise port? And how do you believe the state should weigh economic benefits against environmental risk when considering these issues?
Okay, thank you. To be clear, we've already banned offshore drilling. We did that last session. So that was something I already voted in on the bill, and it passed through the House and the Senate. With regard to the cruise port terminal, it's a bad idea to place something like that in Terracea. Like I said, we've already worked on Senate Bill 302, which was passed and signed by the governor. So that eliminates the ability for the waterside impacts of Terracea. What I've been working on recently is to designate Terracea area of critical concern. That would take from the waterside to the land and restrict any development through that area. I've been working with Senator Boyd's office and the DEP to engage in legislation that would do that.
Candidate Conerly, who should manage Port Manatee, the state or the county, and why?
Neither. I've worked with the port folks. So there was a proposal that came from a local delegation to take the dependent special district to an independent special district. So it would have a board appointed, and the board would be appointed. Some of the members would be appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. Others would be appointed by the governor. And the idea would be that it would be more nimble to react to any potential opportunities. One of the things I've done recently is travel to DC to meet with folks in the space industry, and there was a lot of information that they didn't want to come to Manatee because the port, getting a contract with the port was very difficult. So it's hurting Manatee opportunities for business the way it operates now.
Thank you for that. Candidate Phillips, who should manage Port Manatee, the state or the county, and why?
Well, I think that's the county, because the county is closer to the port and has the greatest impact from the port. I don't think, as I answered earlier about the state applying blanket one-size-fits-all rules, the Port of Manatee is much different than the Port of Tampa, just like it's much different than the Port of Jacksonville, Port of Miami, Fort Lauderdale. They're all different ports. Now, I realize that county commissioners are not necessarily experts on port issues. So if we are going to identify that as an issue, we could create an advisory board. And I know several experts in the local area when it comes to port control. Many of them are retired Coast Guardsmen who that was their job for 20 or 30 years. So we could have an advisory board for county commissioners if they felt like they weren't, adequately informed enough to make decisions based on the port. But we don't need local decisions being made at the 100,000 foot level.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stay with you on this next question here. Florida's new Blue Ribbon Project law allows certain large developments to be approved directly by the state bypassing traditional local government review. What's your position on this approach to development approval, and under what circumstances, if any, would you support revising or limiting the Blue Ribbon Project's process?
At face value, I'm adamantly opposed to it because, again, it's just another tool to remove local home rule, which is, we can have debates all day about how much, say, local developments could have and what the harms could be for big places, big cities like Orlando and larger cities to make decisions that weren't in the best interest of the state overall. But essentially, what I've seen in the last 2 years of legislation is removal of home rule, restricting of local, not only just local residents, but local boards and commissions, restricting their ability to make the yes or no decisions on these large projects that affect us locally and have a dramatic impact on people's home values and the way they live and their quality of life. So I am adamantly opposed to it. As far as getting to legislation to fix it, I would rely heavily on the local leaders throughout the state to tell me what fixes that would benefit them. But essentially getting rid of it would allow them to make their own rules in regards to those rule changes.
You put that. Candidate Conerly, Florida's new Blue Ribbon Project law allows certain large developments to be approved. This is the same question that's just asked, to be approved directly by the state bypassing traditional local government review. What's your position on this approach to development approval, and under what circumstances, if any, would you support revising or limiting the Blue Ribbon Project's process?
To be clear, it's not approved by the state. It gives it gives those properties that qualify a by right, meaning they can develop, but they still have to go through the process at local governments. So it's not as stated. That being said, the bill was written very, very narrowly. So there's, as far as I know, there's only 1 or 2 properties. Neither are in Southwest Florida that qualify to be under that new bill. And again, understanding that, one of my background, the civil engineering, one of the things I have to get involved in many, many times is when you do develop outside the typical boundaries, you're extending services, and it becomes very, very problematic that's the component that I think is very problematic, the extension of infrastructure outside the typical boundaries. So that it's not a perfect bill, but it was written explicitly for a very geographically small area in the state.
Okay, we're going to stay with you for this next question, candidate Conerly. Florida Forever is the state's land conservation program used to acquire and protect environmentally significant lands, water resources, wildlife habitats, and recreational areas. Use of the funds voted by Citizens Initiative has sometimes been used to purchase land with very little environmental value, and most of the funds diverted for other purposes. This year's budget allocated funding only for conservation easements on farmland. What is your position in terms of the use of these funds?
First of all, I do support the use of conservation easements. These are a mechanism by which we can preserve land as it is. The difficulty with the state acquiring land is the operation and maintenance of the land acquired exceeds very quickly the cost of acquisition. That was one of the things I learned when I was brought into my current role as a legislator. I was surprised how much it actually cost for Florida to maintain the land. So with the idea that that's a very good tool, the conservation easements, a very good tool. I don't support the idea of using dollars that were dedicated for Florida Forever to secure those conservation easements. I think if it's intended for Florida Forever, it should be used for Florida Forever. But we need multiple tools in the toolbox to preserve conservation lands.
Thank you for that. Candidate Phillips, same question.
One more time, please.
Absolutely. Florida Forever is the state's land conservation program. It's used to acquire and protect environmentally sensitive or significant lands, water resources, wildlife habitat, recreation areas. Use of the funds voted by Citizen Initiative has sometimes been used to purchase land of very little environmental value, and most of the funds diverted to other purposes. This year's budget allocated funding for only conservation easements on farmland. What would be your position on the use of these funds?
So I believe, if I'm thinking of the right program, I believe we just bought like 4 acres in the Panhandle of Florida that were like beachfront property for like $84 million. We probably could have spent that money more wisely elsewhere if I had the right program. But either way, protection of what's left of natural Florida is the utmost important to me, and we shouldn't be spending these dollars on anything else but preserving. And I understand it is expensive to preserve these lands, and it's a great sacrifice to, like people who might be able to profit from it, but we have a responsibility and a duty to natural Florida, the whole thing that makes Florida beautiful and attracts people to come here. If we overrun the entire state with development, it would be devastating. The other thing about trade-offs, I could cut the muffler off my truck and environmentally pollute the air as long as I drive an electric car 50% of the time. That makes no sense, these trade-offs that we do with the mitigation.
Thank you for that. And Candidate Phillips, we're going to stay with you for this next question.
Yes, ma'am.
The cost of home insurance has transformed Florida into no longer being a low-cost state in which we live. What can the legislature do to help make home insurance more affordable?
Well, there's no question that insurance costs are very high in Florida, and property taxes might be even a bigger burden to the residents, but insurance reform still needs to happen. One thing worth examining, at least in my potential freshman representative perspective, is these insurance companies, the amount of money that they spend advertising, marketing a product that residents are required to carry. It raises legitimate concerns about whether or not the profits are being placed over the consumers. Insurance companies should be more transparent about how they spend their money, including executive pay, administrative costs, advertising claims payouts, and investor returns. And I support the free market, but not when consumers have such few choices and are left vulnerable to near monopolistic practices, I should say. And I would support stronger transparency rules, reasonable limits on investor returns, restrictions on insurance industry contributions from PACs, political committees, or I should say restrictions on insurance industry contributions to PACs, political committees, candidates. And because without that, you're never going to see any true insurance reform.
Thank you for that. Candidate Conerly, same question. The cost of homeowners insurance has transformed Florida into no longer being a low-cost state in which to live. What can the legislature do to make homeowners insurance more affordable?
Yes, and this is again is a subject that's already been brought to the legislature, and we passed the bill 2 years ago that over the past 2 years we've seen a decline in the cost of insurance and the number of policies being carried by citizens has declined year over year. That being said, one of the things we need to continue to monitor and put Florida in a position to do is add additional carriers to the network of insurance companies. And I think over the past this first 6 months, I think they've added 7 different carriers. I think that was a number I might have misrepresented that, but the point being, we're adding carriers to the state. One of the important things to understand is that the cost of insurance is driven by the free market. And if you buy insurance for a house that costs $800,000 versus a house that costs $400,000, it's going to be more. So the high property insurance is a symptom. The actual problem is the escalated value of houses, the high cost of housing in the state.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to stay with you on this next question here. What is your position on expanding Medicaid in Florida? And how would you help residents who have lost coverage or can no longer afford care? Do you believe access to health care is a basic right?
Yes, I believe it's a basic right. I'm not going to agree that we need to expand it. I think it needs to be a topic of discussion and debate and evaluated. It's my position that any solution that comes from discussion and debate is a better solution. There's other things we can do. For example, there's opportunities for savings with regard to eliminating or reducing fraud. That's having an impact on the services that are being provided. So I think it's not a single solution of expanding. It's going to be a tiered solution that provides benefit for the residents of Florida. But it is a very important issue with regard to making sure every Floridian has healthcare insurance.
Thank you for that. Candidate Phillips, same question.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I've experienced a wide range of healthcare realities in my life, from zero coverage to Medicaid to the incredible coverage that I had while serving on active duty. That perspective has taught me that healthcare is not just a policy issue; it's a basic quality of life issue. And for working families, seniors, veterans, and children, Florida can't solve every problem in the national healthcare system alone, but the state can and should do more to protect access and control costs. As federal subsidies decline and more Medicaid costs shift to the state, Florida should focus on preserving coverage for eligible residents, expanding access to preventative care, improving price transparency, like you said, and holding insurance providers and contractors accountable for fraud, waste and abuse, and unfair practices that drive up the cost of healthcare.
Okay.
9 seconds spare.
Candidate Phillips, we're going to stay with you on this next question here. Supervisors of elections have raised concerns about the recently passed Florida SAVE Act. This law will add new restrictions for voting and voter registration in the state beginning next year. Are there any provisions of the SAVE Act that you would like to see revised, and if so, which ones and why?
I don't want to revise any of them, and I strongly support requiring proof of U.S. citizenship, not only in Florida, but nationwide. But that requirement should never be an unfair barrier for eligible citizens. I understand the concerns, but recent polling, nationally suggests that 70 to 80% of the people want the SAVE Act, and it's already passed at the House. We're just waiting on the Senate. I believe most Americans have legitimate concerns about election integrity, but I would also like to see clear numbers on how many eligible citizens could be affected by this. So when weighing with these concerns, I believe that the voter fraud is the greater issue for many Americans and Floridians. So I also think that for anyone who opposes the SAVE Act, it would be better to pass it prior to the midterms, which would help identify any affected eligible voters and give them the time to seek assistance for re-registering, assuming that they were already registered, before the next election, because my gut tells me it's going to be a very small number of people that are affected. But again, I'd like to see the numbers.
Thank you for that. Candidate Conerly? Same
Yes,
question.
yes, ma'am. And again, this is something I already voted on. I support it. I think it's a very good idea. I do. It's not yet been implemented. I think we're going to have to see if there's any difficulties with regard to the implementation, but I believe there are sufficient safety nets and guardrails related to that. I can't imagine it's going, this will be our first opportunity to see how it's done. And I can't imagine it's going to be terribly difficult, because there are opportunities for those folks who are questioned. They can still vote. It just has to be reviewed and after the vote is cast.
Thank you for that. And Candidate Conerly, want to stay with you. Next question here. Government corruption and blind loyalty consistently shows up or near the top of Americans' list of concerns. What specific steps would you support to strengthen transparency and accountability in state government?
I believe transparency is very important. Having gone through 2 legislative sessions, I realized that everything we do is available to the public. It's not uncommon when you serve in the legislature to get questions about different pieces of information are given. I think at the state level, it's very, very different than what occurs at the national level. I think Florida, the intent is to do a very good job at being transparent. I'm sure there's things we can do to make the transparency more available to the average citizens, but I think if you know how to navigate the process, you can find a lot of information with regard to transparency.
Candidate Phillips? Same
Yeah,
question.
I know I'm not allowed to counter anything my opponent says, but can I agree with them? Because I do. The transparency is there in the state of Florida. I'm very proud of the state and the work that we've done here. I think the bigger issue is getting it out there and educating the voting public and letting them know, some of these sites are not as easy to navigate as others. But during my campaign, I've tried to help educate, not that I'm some masterful teacher, but I try to educate the voting public on where to find campaign contributions, how to tie in money from PACs and political committees, and how to just research who's connected to who. And you've seen a lot of that growing within the grassroots movement. So essentially, I agree. We are very transparent. It's not always easy to find, but the information is there, and it's up to the voter to become educated and find this information, to follow the candidates that they've elected and see if they're holding through to their promises.
Okay, and Candidate Phillips, stay with you with this question here. Infrastructure investment. What state infrastructure investments are most urgent with District 72?
By far, our roads, our utilities, our water management, all these things. Essentially concurrency. It disappeared in 2012 with the Florida Community Planning Act. Prior to that, we had the Florida Growth Management Act, which required concurrency. It became optional in 2012. And, I understand the reasoning, or at least the logic behind it, was to reignite the housing market and get development going after the housing crash. But since then, we've had a slew of other bills and legislation passed that heavily favors the builder, reduces impact fees, and basically you build up these new communities, and then you got places like in my county, State Road 70 and State Road 62 are under construction at the same time because of the amount of growth that's happened. The infrastructure is not there. So we need to bring back concurrence, and we need to start charging developers full impact fees. And we also, all right. Sorry. Don't get me started.
Thank you. Candidate Conerly, infrastructure investment. What state infrastructure investments are most urgent for District 72?
Yes, ma'am. Again, having served in the legislature for the last two sessions, I'm aware that we've been able to bring back for infrastructure for Manatee County over the past 2 years, $350 million already. But infrastructure is very expensive. The infrastructure failures that everybody gets to experience almost every day is, of course, traffic. So that's one of the obvious things. But there are many things that need attention or investments: wastewater treatment facilities, water treatment facilities, leachate treatment facilities. All of these are critical infrastructure for quality of life in our area. So it's going to be very, very important to partner with the local government. The reality is the majority of the infrastructure is under the umbrella of the local government. So having a partner like the county where we can bring back $350 million, the county and the cities within, is going to have a significant impact to the quality of life of our residents.
Thank you. Candidate Phillips, same question. Infrastructure investment, what state infrastructure investments are most urgent for District 72?
You get
I
another
already had that question.
opportunity.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Hey,
Sorry.
I'm just glad I didn't start answering it.
Well, that's how important infrastructure is. You got to answer the question twice.
All right. So I think we are at candidate Conerly.
Yes,
Governor DeSantis is committing at least $227 million of taxpayer dollars over the next 5 years to transform New College of Florida into a conservative Hillsdale College-like liberal arts college. Is that a good use of taxpayer money? And if so, why or why not?
That's an old question I heard 2 years ago. The same numbers were used, I believe, 2 years ago. I don't know that it's an accurate representation of the Hillsdale like. That's again something that's been batted around for some time. The reality is that we have three institutions close by, and the main institution in that area is New College. Oftentimes they bring up the issue that the cost per student per semester hour is so high for that school. It's because it needs to be grown into a larger student population. So there's some benefit of scale. So I think it's very important that the state continue to invest in New College, but I also think it's very important that we invest in all of our educational institutions. We have very, very good schools in the state of Florida, and I think it's important that we make those investments to maintain that.
Thank you for that. Candidate Phillips, same question.
After watching a 20-minute show on John Oliver, which I would never normally watch, I saw it on Facebook. There was a lot of misinformation on this. I know it's a heated topic. I know a lot of people are upset about it, but essentially, I think college opportunities. It shouldn't be about indoctrination, and it shouldn't be about swaying people's minds. It should be about growing their minds. So the amount of dollars involved, like you can agree with the purpose of an issue or the intent, but you could also be concerned at the same time about the number, the dollar amount going into it and where's that money going. So I would say I'm not opposed or for it. I just be very concerned about the amount of money that's being spent to make the transformation. That's where we need to look a little bit deeper.
This is going to be our last question, and I'm going to give it to you. This last question first, Candidate Phillips. When redistricting, what factors in the Fair Districts Amendment do you consider important and why?
Are you talking about the congressional redistricting that happened recently or 2 years ago in 22 or back in 22? Redistricting.
The Fair District in the state of Florida.
So
Fair.
for the congressional districts, I, well, I mean, just regular citizen John Phillips looks at this nationwide politics thing that's going on with several other states that have done the redistricting. And I believe it started in the blue states. So, Governor DeSantis was already approved within his rights to implement the redistricting, and it was voted and approved. So we have what was voted and approved on. Whether I agree with that or not, 100% is really irrelevant. I think even mine and Bill's district is, if you look at the lines, it's kind of hard to figure out why it goes from, the State Road 64 and 75 diagonally through the middle of Paris. So I'm not an expert in census and drawing up these lines, obviously, by any means. I could draw up lines on water really well, but essentially, it's already been passed. I don't know. It's more of a tit for tat politics game, if you ask me my honest opinion on it. But we're getting our seats to balance out the blue states that have gained more seats. So in the end,
Thank you for that.
yeah, thanks.
Candidate Conerly, same
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
When redistricting, what factors in the Fair District Amendment do you consider important and why?
Again, I voted on this. I voted in favor of the redistricting. One of the very basic reasons I supported it was that the Supreme Court ruling on Louisiana versus Calais made it very clear that if your districts were drawn with a gerrymandering to include racial or ethnic minorities, it was considered incorrect. It wasn't constitutional. So Florida took action to correct a unconstitutional delineation of districts by removing that component of it. So if you look at the districts now, you can see that the gerrymandering isn't as large or used as much. You see that county lines, county roads, state roads, county roads, local roads, and rivers were used to delineate. So I think it's important to be consistent with the whatever rulings come out to make sure that it's constitutional. Other states have actually gerrymandered to. Okay.
Thank you both for that. So now we are going to start with our 1 minute closing statement. And candidate Conerly, I'm going to give it to you first, please. 1 minute for the closing statement.
Thank you. No, I in my time in the legislature, I've passed or sponsored or co-sponsored 26 bills that have passed and been signed into law. I've been able to bring $590 million back to Manatee County for various entities. I feel like my work is just beginning. One of the things that I've been focusing on is water quality. I've passed bills related to springs restoration, to removal of PFAS from water streams. I've worked on reducing nitrogen loading of surficial waters, the protection of terracea. These are all things I've already done. I feel like I have a lot more work related to the things I've engaged in. And I feel like I'm working for things that are going to benefit the state in 10 years, trying to secure opportunities for water supply, potable water supply, dealing with nutrient loading and discharge of surficial waters. And I see I'm out of time.
Thank you. All right, candidate Phillips, 1 minute for closing statement.
Okay, well, I'm running a truly grassroots campaign. I have no connections to developers or any political connections that would require me to do anything once I get to Tallahassee, other than voice the will of the people of District 72 in Manatee County. I've relied heavily on it. You can check my campaign contributions. You can listen to the people that I've talked to about their concerns, like I will do. And I will make sure, if I don't accomplish anything in 2 years, that's a long list of accomplishments that was provided. The biggest accomplishment that I think the people of Manatee County will be happy with was knowing that I worked with the local county commissioners and the local government, and I listened to my constituents, and I did my best, put up the best fight possible to represent them as a representative should do.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you candidates Bill Conerly and John Phillips III for participating. And thank you to the audience for attending this virtual candidate forum. Tonight's discussion offers voters valuable insight to help make thoughtful and informed choices in the upcoming election. The League is hosting forums for most of the primary races at the federal, state, and county levels. To view the full schedule, register for upcoming events, or share nonpartisan resources with friends and neighbors, please visit the League of Women Voters Manatee County's website at LWVMC.org. Thank you for joining us.